Worship leaders and teams, get ready. Series 10 of the Worship Team Training Podcast is here. This season, we're tackling the challenges you face every week, from leading with confidence to building healthy team culture and navigating spiritual and musical growth. And by the way, if you're looking for personalized coaching, our Worship Team Training Mentoring Program is here to help. Whether you need leadership development, team building, or a fresh perspective on ministry, we'll walk with you every step of the way. Listen more for details on our latest episode today. Now let's get to the podcast. Hope you enjoy this one and all of our episodes on the Worship Team Training Podcast.
What if you're a leader who doesn't like to, who is afraid of confrontation? I would just say you're not a leader. You have a title, but you're not a leader.
Yeah.
I mean, that's almost job number one, of being a leader. So it is something you have to evaluate in yourself. If you have a position of leadership and you don't confront your people when it's necessary, then you're not being a leader.
Mm-hmm. So Tony, if you don't confront for the negative, that also means you're not supporting the positive.
Yeah.
It costs you something.
Yeah.
Right.
And leadership's about having the power and the willing to put yourself out there to do both.
Right.
And I'm gonna add to that, make your plan plain so that everybody can follow. Part of leadership too is communicating where everybody's going. Hey, guess what? We're all going through the Red Sea. I just want to make sure that Johnny Joe and she makes it through too. But apparently they don't know what that is. So we need to educate, make the plan clear. We're all going in this direction. Sometimes, no, not sometimes, but all the time that I feel as part of leadership, if you establish that, then people actually make their choices on their own. And they actually are preemptive of going, yeah, I'm not sure I can commit to that, or yeah, I'm all on board or whatever. But leaders, good confrontation, good plan, make it plain. People can go through it, and those are really good contributions and ideas for this, guys. I'm liking this show.
Hey, worship teams. Welcome to the Worship Team Training Podcast with Brandon Dempsey. Here are your hosts, Tony Guerrero, Chariya Bissonette, Rich Kirkpatrick, and Brandon Dempsey. Worship Team Training provides live workshops and online resources to help inspire, create, and transform the leading of worship. Let's jump into today's topic. Hope you enjoy.
Hey, worship teams, leaders, friends, everybody coming in. We appreciate you guys downloading the Worship Team Training Podcast. I'm Brandon Dempsey. We have our awesome favorite co-host that I love and adore every week, no matter if they're related or not. Tony, Chariya Bissonette, Rich Kirkpatrick, Tony Guerrero. Say what's up, everybody. How are y'all?
Doing good.
Good to see you.
All right, good. So last week, we talked about how you as a leader may need to take a step back, or those in your team may need to take a step back. And it is usually on good circumstances. They need to take a break. But what if we flip the situation and your team member is having to take a step back because of unsettled reasons? Maybe they're uncommitted, maybe they're habitually late, absent, or even dissatisfied about what's going on in your worship ministry. So don't you hate it when you get that email that says, "Hi, Tony, Chariya has declined for Sunday morning"? Well, we're going to address that today. So anyway, how do we manage our worship team members who are struggling with commitment, time management, dissatisfaction, all of the above? Before we dive into these conversations, we ask that you would please hit the subscribe button as you're watching this or as you're listening to this so you can get all the downloads when they drop. Thanks so much for that. Back to the question. Have you ever dealt with somebody on your team who has been habitually late or absent or just not fully invested into what you're doing? And how did that impact the team? Let's start with Chariya this morning. From your perspective, Chariya, what's up? How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thank you.
Awesome. What are some most common reasons why worship team members struggle with commitment? And this could be either what you see in your team or in what you see abroad.
Well, this is ironic because I think before we started rolling for the show, I said it just is ironic. I just had to deal with this last week with three very significant people on my team. And first and foremost, I have all volunteers. So, I think I don't know how many other people have that, but I think it's maybe a little bit different with volunteers. Maybe it's not. The conclusion that I've come to, once again, I'm going to use the word, I'm informed. I think we have to be informed about people and not insulted or offended or put off. I think everybody has lives. And first and foremost, I would say, as far as the reasons are concerned, people can have any reason for that. They can have any reason whatsoever for wanting to do something. Spirit's willing, flesh is weak. They've got commitments. They've got work. They've got family. They've got ideas about even what being on a worship team is. There's just a slew of various reasons. So I like to just cut to the chase. And whenever something happens, like it did this last week, I like to go back to what culture have I created and am I leading? Is it equipping? Is it building? Is it personal? Once again, I told everybody before in our past podcasts, I get to know everybody. I really do, because I want to know them, especially those that have expressed to me they want more leadership, responsibilities, and so forth. So as an example, I asked one of my team members, help me to manage you. If you were me, what would you do in this situation? In which case, there's two important dates that we've communicated. We're elevating you to a leadership position. And when we're supposed to be doing that on a Sunday, you communicate on a Tuesday that you're not going to be able to do it. So you need to help me understand and manage you, so I know how to manage you and manage you in the situation. Well, it's a tricky question. There was no answer for that. But what I will tell you is it's evidence of someone wanting to do something but not knowing how to follow through with it. So there are times that I will reschedule them, or I will not put them in as much. I will back up on things just to make sure they have enough time to consider what they want to do and how they want to do it. Now, I know that probably sounds super simplistic, but I feel like if I catch it on the front end, then even though what happened, this last week, it can be really uncomfortable. And it was a lot of shifting and a lot of turning around. But I think really working hard to get to know your people. Why might they not? Why are they doing this? I don't think anybody's malicious in meaning to do that. I think that we sometimes as leaders, we can help with the pacing. Even if someone wants to do something sooner, maybe we realize that they're not quite ready for that. And there are some steps we can take. Hopefully that helped. I know that was a long way to go.
Yeah, I mean, what you're addressing are, in simple terms, expectations. And it's very common that most team members don't have the right set of understandings of what that may entail when you join a team. And you're right. I love what you said. It's creating the culture that we created. Like, this is the reason why maybe people are responding in our team, because it's how we're reflecting our own leadership. So, Tony, how do you balance, and you're perfect for this question, how do you balance grace with accountability? So, like,
he's perfect for every question.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, like, how do you balance grace with accountability? I mean, we want to lead with love. Tony may not be so much on that, but at what point does an ongoing issue become a leadership problem where you're going to have to deal with it pragmatically? How would you address that?
Well, the issue isn't being late. Everybody's late for various reasons at different times, but you said habitually late, and that's the issue that has to be tackled. Right. And I find it incredibly hypocritical of Christians who can get on stage and sing, "God is in the room," and the King is here, and yet you were late for that. You knew God was coming. And,
that's awesome.
And you decided to stop for Starbucks instead. Mm-hmm. And I always think, wouldn't it be funny if we could announce to your team, hey, I don't know, Taylor Swift or Bono is going to come and speak to our team. There's only 10 seats left. There's 15 of you. It's, first come, first serve. They'd all be there hours early to make sure they got their seat, right? But then you tell them, hey, God's going to meet us here Sunday morning. Yeah, I'll be 20 minutes late. So
Kendrick Lamar is going to stop by, so make sure you're here.
Yeah, so it's a real... it's kind of really easy to point out the hypocrisy there. And in terms of hypocrisy, when I've dealt with this issue, I have 6 traits that I think this habitual lateness is a display of. One is pride, I don't need this. I don't need the rehearsal as much. You guys are there to serve me. There's selfishness, laziness. You're not willing to put in that effort to get there on time. Disorder, you're not willing to put the work in that is required to make order out of a service. Disrespect, I mean, that's a huge issue. When you are habitually late, you are disrespecting everybody else on the team. And whatever you did for the least of these, you're disrespecting Jesus when you do that. And then I already mentioned hypocrisy. So those things, to me, habitual lateness is a display of all of those things. Now, the fact is, like I've said before, ministry is just a gathering of the human condition. People aren't just late to worship. They're, late on certain jobs. They're late to family parties. They're late to whatever, they miss their flights constantly. So habitual lateness is just a human condition that we're going to find in the church as well. The solution, to me, is and when I used to speak a lot at conferences, it was one of the most common questions. How do I deal with so-and-so on my team who is this? And often it was lateness. But it's always, I was, after a while, I wasn't shocked anymore, but originally shocked to find out how many times I asked this question and the answer was no. And the question is, well, are you the leader? Have you spoken to them directly about this? No. You haven't? You haven't actually gone to them. So Matthew 18 is such an important verse for how we deal with each other, our chapter, because it outlines how we're supposed to deal with conflict with another believer. And when you do that and you go to somebody, hey, your habitual lateness is an issue for the team. We need to fix that. Does it get fixed? No. All right, take it one step up. Meet with you and the pastor now. Take it to the next step if that doesn't work. And then at some point, they got to be cut off. And it's very important that if you're leading, you have to set those boundaries. Don't just say to your team, if you guys are 5 minutes late, you're not going to be on stage with us that weekend, and then you don't do it. You don't want to do it because, I need drums, so I guess I just have to allow them. Don't set these boundaries and not keep them. It's just like being a parent. You've got to set boundaries for your team and expectations, whether they're paid or volunteer.
That's right.
And, especially if they're paid, but even for volunteers, there have to be expectations. They have to be met, or you have to do follow through. And so many leaders are bad at confrontation and follow through. And those are the key ways you may not fix the person, but you'll fix that issue on your team. That person may have to leave your team for it to get fixed. But finally, I'll say this: my former worship pastor used to audition, he had people that were on his team for 20 years or more. He used to audition everybody every 6 months, I believe. And even old timers had to re-audition. The reason was because in that audition process, you are signing up for this next season. And so we all go through seasons where sometimes it's harder to show up to things, or, now I'm in a night class, so I can't come to rehearsals every week or whatever it is. So you don't lose your place. You just take a season off. But when you commit to a season, you're committed. These are all the dates, these holidays are involved, all of this it's just like a job in that sense. You have your schedule ahead of time, and you're signing on people would have to sign those forms. I commit to this. I commit, of course things change, or, you get sick and stuff like that. But in general, that was the idea. Commit to this season, and then we'll reevaluate. Commit to this season, then we'll reevaluate. So
you're listening to the Worship Team Training Podcast. Be sure to follow us on our socials: Facebook, Threads, YouTube, Blue Sky, Instagram, Substack, and X. Also, please click the subscribe button from where you're listening to this podcast. and receive all the new shows and downloads when they drop. Thanks again for following and listening to the Worship Team Training Podcast. Now back to our episode.
All right. That's awesome. And you bring up a really great point. Hold on. I want to park on that for a second. Rich, this is about addressing the problem. And confrontation is hard, as Tony is talking about that. So what would you say to a leader who is afraid of confrontation, addressing things like lateness or commitment issues, because they don't want to lose the volunteer? How do you approach those conversations? And how do you get them engaged into the congregation without them becoming disengaged from you?
Well, I think that there's two leadership terms that just pop in my head that are kind of academic. One's laissez-faire leadership. That's an issue. And the second one is power of incumbency. I'll start with that one, because what if it's the senior pastor's wife on the worship team? What do you do in that situation? Do they have a special class of rules, or her best friend or his best friend if it's the husband of the senior pastor in some cases?
The family.
So what do you do in that situation? So the power of incumbency, you walk into a situation, someone's been there 20 years, whatever. Now, Tony, that was a great system to have, that person, because you need on-ramps and off-ramps for every position, because seasons change and times change, and it gives you an opportunity to have a clean slate. So one of the things is to say, okay, every 6 months, every year, every single person re-signs up because the needs change of the church, and people are human and they need to get out. It does two things. One, it says that the incumbency is not the most important thing. You're just staying in your position. You're the drummer of the church. What it says is that we might need two drummers on the rotation now, so you're signing up for a different thing. Or if you need to take a break, it says, well, maybe in 6 months again, I could come back when the new job I have, I'm finally onboarded and it's working well for me. And so it really creates that. And so that, to me, says that systems sometimes are really the problem. We always focus on, pleasing people or not, or what are they going to say or not. Oftentimes we have to lead from principle in order for the relational to make sense. You could be as nice as you want to people. Like, I've tried being super nice to people. But generally, it's not my being nice or not that's going to keep them on the team. It's me being trustworthy that this is where we're going, and here's the authority that I've actually been given to help direct the team. Now, of course, if I haven't been an authority, then that's going to undercut me, and that's a whole other story. And that's where I go to laissez-faire leadership, where the average default of leaders of all situations is just to kind of deal with things as they come and not plan ahead, not lead with any kind of direction. The direction is chosen for you. And, I've worked for some leaders like this where you talk to them, they're really great. Again, relationally, you love these people. That's how they survive. But they don't do anything. They just wait for the heat to come, and then they put the fire out. So I suggest that we fight against power of incumbency, where we have on-ramps and off-ramps, and don't make it personal. Make it that this is a value that's for all of us to achieve. And then the second thing is to reject this idea of just responding to things all the time. As opposed to that, no, we're not responding. We have things that we're shooting for. We'd love for our team to be able to do this in 2 years, to have this kind of a sound, or to have these kind of people included that we haven't been able to include, like the youth or whatever it is. So that's making a direction. And the personal stuff's important too. Emotional intelligence and all the other stuff, and Matthew 18 and doing things of order. But really the system, sometimes we don't question. We don't question the fact that people can, they're working on a different thing. You guys already talked about this, but what do they say, psychologists, that when there is expectation and there is reality and they don't match, that's what disappointment is. That's the classic definition of disappointment. So people are going to be disappointed. We have to either take them to reality, their expectations, or we're going to have to change their reality. And this is where we're always at. We're trying to change reality for people. And sometimes we might work for a leader, some of the people listening, who want the reality to be something different. You have 100 people in your church and they want it to sound like Elevation Worship with, 20,000 people in the stadium from the night before. And so that's the reality. It's that pastor might be disappointed. Well, in the same way, you are disappointed with your worship team member because you're expecting them to behave a certain way. You haven't created the reality of the tools, the on and off ramps, and the communication that says, hey, this is what we all are expect of ourselves to do. And, or you haven't changed expectations, saying, well, we don't really mean that. So it's okay that you're late, right? So you have to swallow the system that you create and be willing to think farther ahead as a leader as to what you really want it to be culturally and relationally as well.
I'm going to add a less friendly answer to your initial question, which is, you said, what if you're a leader who doesn't like to, who is afraid of confrontation? I would just say you're not a leader. You have a title, but you're not a leader.
Yeah.
I mean, that's almost job number one, of being a leader. So it is something you have to evaluate in yourself. If you have a position of leadership and you don't confront your people when it's necessary, then you're not being a leader.
Mm-hmm.
So Tony, if you don't confront for the negative, that also means you're not supporting the positive.
Yeah.
It costs you something.
Yeah.
Right.
And leadership's about having the power and the willing to put yourself out there to do both.
Right.
And I'm gonna add to that, make your plan plain so that everybody can follow. Part of leadership too is communicating where everybody's going. Hey, guess what? We're all going through the Red Sea. I just want to make sure that Johnny Joe and she makes it through too. But apparently they don't know what that is. So we need to educate, make the plan clear. We're all going in this direction. Sometimes, no, not sometimes, but all the time that I feel as part of leadership, if you establish that, then people actually make their choices on their own. And they actually are preemptive of going, yeah, I'm not sure I can commit to that, or yeah, I'm all on board or whatever. But leaders, good confrontation, good plan, make it plain. People can go through it, and those are really good contributions and ideas for this, guys. I'm liking this show.
Mm.
You will have to pay though. You will have to pay though sometimes for that confrontation.
Absolutely.
Well,
you
yeah.
might
leave.
lose your job. You might. And that might be okay if you can't lead well in the situation, right? If you're not allowed to have those kind of conversations, which is kind of what I was alluding to, is sometimes the pastor doesn't want you to have those conversations, not just because it's his wife that's on your team, but it's other reasons politically. And so sometimes that is tough. But like Tony said, I think it's a reality. You can't lead unless you can do that.
That's right.
Yeah. Good talks. All right. So let's talk about solutions, shall we? Because that is what people are wanting to know when they're listening, watching to this conversation that we're having. What's the first thing that worship leaders should do when they notice patterns that are challenging for their leadership or for the team due to everything that we just talked about, all the above? When someone on the team, let's say, is dissatisfied, maybe they're getting upset about the schedule, songs, whatever. How should leaders handle this? Like, what are some, Chariya, give us some, you talked about, and everybody here has talked about like an agreement to sign, auditioning, a covenant, things like that. What are some pragmatic steps that worship leaders can take to ensure the leadership and unity of their team?
Number one, I'm going to say, don't be surprised. I think sometimes you get caught on your heels because you get surprised. Do not be surprised by human behavior, by words that people choose, by whatever. Do not be surprised. Number two, always be theologically tethered to your plan. If you know why you're doing it between you and God, you understand what the theology is behind the songs you're choosing, the momentum you're doing, the plan you're taking. If you can be in simpatico with your pastor, that's even better. But always be theologically tethered. At least you have a reason. Then you can have a dialogue about why you're making the choices you're making. And that's not just for the song's choice. That's what the culture is of your team. I have focus words. We're builders of people and we're respecters of time. And those are our two focus words that we are. That means everything operates within those. Those are actualities. Everybody onboarding understands that that's part of the culture. I think the third thing that I would say, which is very, very important, always give yourself a beat to respond and develop very good diplomacy if needed and firmness if needed in what you communicate. A lot of times people will confront that emotionally because they're tested. They get upset about it, or I can't believe it, or they're being disrespectful. And we have these emotions and these justifications as leaders, which I think is completely true. But as leaders, one of the most important thing we can do, almost like parents, is we need to take a step back, take a beat. Think about what you really want to be communicated to this person, and think about their overall good. What is their overall good? Maybe taking some time off is good. Maybe take this next 2 weeks off. We'll revisit it. Maybe I'm more important. This thing will fix itself. I'm more important about what's going on in your brain. Maybe they have issues going on with parents or people or whatever that we don't know about. It's an opportunity for that. So I'd say probably those things are actual practical things that have been, I know for me, I do that all the time. Tried, tested. I try to land on any one or all of those.
Could I jump in?
Go for it. I'm waiting for you.
You said something that's so meaningful to me in that, earlier I just mentioned about like you set your boundaries, you stick to them, and you follow through. But what you just said reminded me there's a key ingredient in there, and that is that you have to know your people individually. And there's I don't know if you guys know the story of Ernest Shackleton. He was an explorer 100 years ago, and he took his crew to the Antarctic, and they got stuck in the ice, and they were stranded there for over 2 years, and he got them all back safely to England. And it's an amazing story. There's documentaries and books, and it's a great story. But he never accomplished his goal his whole life. Like, he had one goal and he never accomplished it after, I think, 6 tries. And yet he's considered one of the greatest leaders of all time. And the reason is, when you go through the journals of those men, other Antarctic expeditions, you would see in people's journals, they would start slipping into madness. Well, the people under Shackleton, they were all like, I don't want to say positive, upbeat, but nobody did that. They all survived. They all made it back home, and their diaries were full of hope. And then when you go through the personalities of the people, and there's great books written about this, the photographer and the captain, like all these different people who were on that expedition had all these varied personalities. And the key thing for Shackleton was he led them individually. He knew where each one of them were. Like the one guy who was the most antagonistic, he put him in his tent so that he would be the one dealing with that guy. And just a more personal story, at the first church I was ever involved in worship, I had a situation in my life that was making some of the ministry difficult for me. And it was a personal situation that my pastor knew about. And there was a person in the church who was bothered by, I'm trying to like make this so vague. There was a person in the church who had problems with me. And the pastor basically said, I know what's going on. And so you just tell that person if they have, and he told everybody on my team and everything, you tell them that if anybody has a problem, they come to me. Meaning, you can set your boundaries as the leader and the guidelines and all of the expectations. You can do your follow through, but when it's important to make an exception, you don't have to divulge that to anybody. That's, all they need to know is you are the leader and you know what you're doing and that you've put the effort into that. Because there are times when people have crises in their life, when they have situations, I do remember one person who could not get childcare until a certain time, and she was going to be 20 lates to rehearsal every single time. But she was committed in every possible way. You can't, that's different from somebody who's just habitually late and doesn't care. And so you make those exceptions when they're necessary. And if people have problems with that, they have to come to you. That should be the expectation.
And hey, Brandon, you guys, I hope you don't mind. I just want to jump on and just tell a quick story of the reason why I am so dogged about knowing my people. So in the beginnings of my ministry, I had an assistant, and this assistant was amazing. And she was always there and everything was great. One day, she just out of the blue, she said, "Hey, I'm going to be moving." And I said, "You're going to be moving? Like, what's going on?" And she was like, "Yeah, I'm going to be moving, out of town." And I'm like, "Oh, did your husband get a new job or what was going on?" She says, "No, I'm actually getting a divorce." And I was like, "Oh." And all of these things were news to me. And as this conversation happened behind closed doors, she revealed to me areas on her body that had been beaten and were bruised so badly. And no one ever saw it because it was covered. And these were the remainders, and she was going to go live with family. And I remember in that moment, me, of course, having a traumatic background in my childhood. I sat there and listened to her. I wished her the best of everything. I wanted to keep in touch. She was leaving basically the very next day. There was no roll time or nothing. And I remember when she left, I thought to myself, Chariya, out of all the people, that is something that you should have picked up. You should have known that. You should have seen the signs. And I know we're not supposed to shoulda, woulda, coulda on ourselves, but it was a big lesson to me. Then I remember that I changed that day. With everybody that I talked to, I changed. I say in my mind, I need to have eyes to see everything. Nothing is more important, especially in worship ministry, and ministry anyway, is more important than that person. And it affected me. And I was glad I never did anything stupid or said anything dumb. We go back in time when we do that. But that was the most significant time of my leadership that changed into the areas of really prioritizing what Tony just said and what I sort of spilled out in my focus points or whatever. So whatever that's worth.
Feeling stuck in a musical rut? Is your team struggling with unity or commitment? Let's talk about leveling up your worship team. Imagine a tailor-made workshop that comes right to your church, designed to revitalize your team's skills and spiritual formation. It's budget-friendly and could be the game changer you've been looking for. Go to www.worshipteamtraining.com/workshops. Get 20% off when you inquire today.
Yeah, I love that. I believe you're right. There comes a point where we have to decide priority. Is it people or is it our craft of music? And I always have to put people first, because when we look at ministry, that's what ministry is. It's a homogeneous of, like what Tony said, personal issues coming together, or maybe Rich said that. And we have to deal with that from a human standpoint. The set list can't teach us that. And I love creating and making music and doing things well, just like the rest of us here on the team on our podcast. But I believe that when you begin to tap into the people that you're leading, and you learn to not get the best out of them, but you teach them how to get the best out of themselves. I think from a personal standpoint, I derive a lot of joy in doing that, because I know then the music is going to be great afterwards, right? I know that the human makeup of it is really the issue. And maybe there's that season, right, where, like last week we talked, maybe that's the season where this person that is going through so much personally, maybe it's good for them to take that short leave of absence to get things right. But then what do we do as leaders to help usher them into that scenario where they can really get rest and really receive reassurance from us as the leader to say that it's okay to take time and heal, rather than worrying that they're not going to be on the spot next week because who's going to do drums or bass that Sunday. So I want to know this too, because people are different and every leader is different. Some people are more dominant, like Tony. Others are not, like maybe Rich is more a little bit laid back. I'm a little bit in between. Chariya's like way out there, all right? But then you have other leaders in different churches that maybe they have just not been taught how to interact with people and to deal with confrontation. And maybe just from a personal standpoint, because of their upbringing, they're just not that nature of person, right? But now they're thrusted into this leadership. They really want to do well. I spoke with a worship leader this past week who asked me that question. Yeah, but Brandon, I'm not a confrontational leader. I don't know how to deal with people, but yet I'm the worship leader. And they're brand new, by the way. This is their first year. And they really want to achieve some greatness of leading a ministry that God's called them to. So, Rich, what advice do you have for people that may not have the leadership type makeup, or they're not as dominant, but yet they have real problems just like everybody else and they have to deal with them? What do you say to them?
Well, leadership isn't about alpha all the time. That's not the point of leadership. The point is the people you lead. And they could be moving in the right direction without ever knowing that you're leading them. That's probably the best kind of leadership, kind of stealth leadership. But I think the point here is that it's always about people, but that's not one note. Because it's about people individually, yes. But it's also about people system-wise. Am I structured enough to help the people perform what they're going to do? It's also about culture. Do we have a vision to go in a direction? So that's a people thing as well. And then the jungle aspect, the politics of it, that's also about people. It's understanding that there are situations that have competing things that go on. Oftentimes younger leaders, including myself when I was young, didn't understand that there are these two very nice people on the staff, for instance, who love each other, but they want to go in different directions. And somehow their leadership, even if they're not trying to, is pulling things in two different directions. And you might be caught in the middle of that, or you're one of those persons. And so, but each one of those things is about people. So everything that I'm doing has to be in that direction. Now, if I'm really good at the music, I was told one time, by the way, Tony, music's too good. I was like, what is that? That's about, music directors are here with me. He said, good job, right? And no, because the politics of it was the pastor was upset that he wasn't, his friends weren't complimenting his sermons as much as they were the music. And that was a political, emotional thing. But yet I had to understand in that situation, I had the music director, I had to deal with that. The music was good because of this, but then it wasn't resonating for some reason with the primary leader of the church. And so I had to figure out what that meant. And so that's what leadership is like. You are sandwiched between competing, two people on the team that are they're good people, but they have kind of different motives for being on the team. And they may not be bad motives necessarily, but this is kind of what leadership's about. So part of what you have to grow is that muscle of being able to see which type of leadership do I need in this situation? And I need to have people around me to help me when it's this thing like, okay, if the music's always great, that's fine, but I'm not really understanding where the primary leader, what he's really trying to say, I need to find that out. Or if everyone comes on time, they're excited to be there, but the charts aren't right, then that's a system thing. Then I'm caring for people by doing that. And sometimes, we might be so good with people that we don't care for them in these other categories, that we don't look to organize well for them or whatever those things might be. And you have everyone here in this particular group is pretty organized. I'm pretty sure about that. But some people listening, that may not be your thing. And so that may be one of the reasons it's harder individually to deal with people. It's because you don't have some things clearly mapped out for them. And getting help in that is going to help you a deal, just like with somebody who's really strong and can tell you how like it is, but they're not, not able to listen and have empathy. That could be a problem. So you can have a great system and not be very nice about it. You could be super nice about it and have a bad system. Both of those are wrong. This is what makes leadership so hard, is we have to juggle all constantly multiple things in order to move people forward. And that's going to be individual, yes. It's going to be group, yes. It's going to be organization, yes. It's going to be perceptions, yes. We have to do all of that and then own all of that. But at the same time, not lose ourselves in it, not lose our dignity, not lose our character, not lose our cool, which I've done all those things. I mean, especially the cool, I lost my cool. You think I'm laid back, right? Not. Some people would probably argue with that, Brandon, depending on the meeting that it is. So I had a pastor tell me, I used to think the senior pastor, he said, what's your opinion about this, actually meant that. And so if you're 27 out there and your pastor says, what's your opinion on this? don't take the bait. I'm just saying, this is an example of just, as we progress and grow in our leadership, we learn these kinds of things. And that's where it's good to have podcasts like this. It's good to have mentors. It's good to have people in our lives that help us. Don't lead alone. That's part of this craziness of the multiverse of leadership, is you need to be around people and have them intentionally help you, especially the areas that you're just not as experienced in. And so if have a hard time confronting, then I just need to talk to the two people I know who are great at it and seem to be successful, and get some coaching in that.
I love that. Tony, before we wrap up, give us some practical steps of how to have those difficult conversations.
Well, first of all, I am not a dominating leader. And I will confront you right now.
A dominating leader.
I will confront
Just so
you right
you know.
now. Yeah,
It's okay. We're all friends here, Tony.
Say that.
Seriously.
Put it on
This is
me.
part
Put it on
of our
me.
weaknesses.
Look, I don't know. I'm not a genius here. I don't know if I'm right, but I think I'm right.
You are.
Almost every chronic, and I say chronic, meaning ongoing issue with people on your team is a leadership problem. Anything that is an ongoing issue on your team that hasn't been dealt with, you are to blame if you are the leader. Yes, they're doing the action, but you are allowing it. God tells us, like, we have to have our own home in order, right? I mean, that goes right to the leader. I mean, our kids are going to do what they're going to do, but it's on me as the leader of my family, right? I have a responsibility there. We have a responsibility on our teams. Any healthy organization, if your church is healthy, that pastor gets a lot of credit for that. And if it's unhealthy, if there's dysfunction in a church or in your ministry, you as the leader are responsible for that. So this whole question, like, again, going back to when I used to do all those conferences, I would always turn those questions about the questions that started with, there's somebody on my team who does this. It was instantly in my head, the bullet started firing. Okay, I'm gonna start questioning you about you and how you lead, because that person is, you've got humans on your team, and ministry is just a gathering of the human condition, which means does leaders still have to deal with that other person? And so you've taken us from a 20,000 foot view. Well, that's the word. Deal. They have to deal with the people. And that's where, if you're avoiding that, if you're avoiding confrontation, if you're avoiding getting into the trenches with your people, getting to know them personally, getting to know what the underlying causes of, why they're doing that, letting them know how it's affecting the team, setting expectations and expecting them to meet them, and then following through with the consequences. If you're not willing to do that, you're not leading. And if you, and yes, they're doing those actions, but you are responsible for your team. They aren't responsible for your team. They're responsible for their role. You are responsible for your team if you're the leader.
So how does the leader approach those tough conversations?
You do it. You pick up the phone. You send the email. You get together for coffee. You do it. And I love what Rich said. If that's not your strong point, go get some coaching. Like, if you just want to be in your leadership position and not learn how to lead, well, then, you're going to eventually fail, and you really shouldn't be in that job. So that, I mean, it's just, it's Nike, you just do it. You've got to just do it. There is no excuse, really. There is no, like, how do I do it? I don't know what to do. Like, you just do it. I mean, I don't love confrontation. In fact, I am really, I have an aversion to it. I don't like it at all. But I have learned the value and I've learned the benefits of picking up that phone and getting together with somebody, and being face to face is always best. I should change what I said. Don't do email. Don't do texts. Be face to face, or at the very least on the phone. Let's hear the inflections in your voice, But there's no simpler answer. You just have to do it.
Worship Team Training's mentoring program offers expert guidance tailored to your needs, from developing your leadership as it relates to your ministry, your worship team, and your personal development. This program fits your schedule and budget, helping you grow in worship, leadership, and spiritual depth. Transform your worship ministry with confidence. Check out the mentoring program today at worshipteamtraining.com/mentoring. Sign up today.
It's like the new Nike commercial during the Super Bowl where it says, I can't do this, but I can do that. It's more like that's similar to us. I can't speak. I'm afraid of fear of people, but you can do it. Like I can do all things through Christ. Chariya, take us home now. What are some ways that worship leaders can take this week to improve the commitment to themselves and to their team?
Well, I think that, much of what everybody's already said is so rich and very helpful, I think, to everyone. First and foremost, we have an obligation and a duty, but also more than anything, our relationship with Christ tells us to go through a sanctification process of ourselves. And it'd be good for this week for people to assess themselves. Where am I? Do I know my people? Where is this? Where have I contributed? Whether it's a season or a lack of my own abilities. I think that's part of your responsibilities to put yourself under the griller, as I call it. I think that always work to have relationships with people. It's not hard. If you're talking about people's kids and you're talking about debt, or you're talking about job changes, you're talking about challenges, you're praying for people on a daily basis. My daily prayer that I send to you guys goes out to my team as well. It's not a hard conversation to roll from that daily or weekly relationship into, hey, what's going on? This is the third time you've been late. It's informing me that maybe you don't want to say something or maybe whatever. It's an easier time. I would say, once again, to get back down to the basics. What are we really doing? What are we doing? Our number one thing is to be an ambassador of God. There's certain times where you have to put your foot down and then you have to take your portion. Yeah, I let that go because I didn't have any other drummers, so I just let this guy come in or whatever. Or, yep, I didn't know that I could do that, but I'm going to correct it right now. Or, yep, and no harm, no foul. Part of leading is making sure everybody gets through the Red Sea. And if people aren't getting through that, that's on you. And it's good to do that. I'm even going to say something about what Rich brought up. Rich has been through, as we've been through, very difficult situations where you have to have difficult conversations with sacred cows, that, relatives of pastors, even whatever. And you are going to have those times. And check yourself once, twice, 3 times. Make sure that what you are saying is a godly correction or a godly something or other, whatever it ends up being, and then say it, because that's part of your responsibility to do your best in that situation, to hold the line. You might be holding the line and being the anchor more than maybe leadership is. And that's also something to give yourself an encouragement. God might use you to be the only strong one in a particular situation.
All right. Awesome. Rich, final words.
Well, lots of great stuff right there. Don't wait for the perfect moment, the perfect situation just to act as the leader. I think sometimes we get paralyzed into thinking, well, when is the right kind of situation? I'm going to wait till this person's more ready to have that conversation, whatever. No, it's better to do it as a novice, but to do the right thing. And so I would say oftentimes, and those of us who are not novices or veterans out here, the mistake is just not acting sometimes. It's just waiting too long. And leadership's about survival often. Because the leader, if you can't survive, you can't lead your team the next day. You're less likely to survive the longer that you wait to act when it comes to confronting issues. And it's better to make a mistake and, not do it perfectly, but to progress in that direction. It's healthier to do that. And sometimes we have bumps when we're learning, we're new in a situation. And that's okay if we, make the calculus that this is about the greater good. This is about, like this thing Chariya was talking about. How are we filtering ourselves in this situation spiritually? How are we growing? How are we connected to God and the people in this enough? So when we're doing this, even if it feels like it's making a mistake or we're not doing it perfectly, we are still acting so that we're putting the truth on the table, and we're putting the greater good of the church on the table, and we're putting this important role that we have to help people pray and lead them in singing and worship as something that's very special. And we're keeping that. And it's very important. And so that's why leadership is so important in this. It's not just about the perks of it, because it's so fun to be in front, and when the music's going great and people are in a good mood that particular Sunday, that's great. But there's so many more other things that make that worth more. And that's us surviving long enough and our team members thriving in that.
Awesome. So thinking back to what a mentor of mine said long ago, that sacred cows make great hamburgers. And next time, worship leader, when you get the email that says, "Hi, Tony, Chariya has declined for this Sunday morning," think about maybe your team and knowing maybe what they're going through in their life, maybe knowing that there's some issues that they're facing, maybe knowing that some hard conversations need to take place. But it is truly about developing yourself as a leader. And mention that we do have a mentoring program here at Worship Team Training. And if you'd like to be mentored by any one of us, all you need to do is just DM us on one of our socials and let us know. We'd be glad to help. So
Brandon,
a lot of great.
one thing before we wrap up?
Add one, you got 30 seconds.
So I don't think there's anybody listening to this that doesn't already know everything we've said. It's that it's so hard to put it into practice sometimes. So I'm hoping that this conversation I don't think we're teaching anybody. I think we're reminding everybody. Just let this be an encouragement to you. Yeah. And the fact is, Scripture has no problem confronting us. You open Scripture, it confronts us right at our sin constantly. So you want to be more Christ-like, learn how to be truthful and speak truth to your team members in that way.
Yeah. Love it. Thanks for that last plug, Tony. So guys, we wish you the best as you commit to this week to be the better version leader that God's called you to be, and that you can grow into that. And guys, we thank you for joining us here on the Worship Team Training Podcast. Thanks for subscribing. And remember, it's not about being perfect, but about allowing the Lord Jesus to lead you both in life and in worship. See you back next time. Bye.
Thank you for joining us today. Will you help us spread the word by giving us a high rating and dropping a comment to share the love? This recording is a Worship Team Training registered trademark and digital broadcast, all rights reserved, copyright 2025. Please subscribe to Worship Team Training. See you again on the next one.
Hey friends, I just want to say a special thanks for listening all the way through this podcast where most people don't. But because you did, I want to offer you a special gift. Go to either our Instagram page or Facebook, which is Worship Team Training. Send me a DM, and all you need to put is the word journey, and I will send you a free copy of my new devotional that we've revamped, and we'd like for you to use it with your worship team. Again, go to any of our socials, Worship Team Training, DM me, and put journey inside the chat, and I'll send the link your way. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next one.